Good evening. Welcome to Los Angeles Filmforum at MoCA. So this is a collaborative screening series that we have here, hopefully illuminating the history of experimental film and video in the context of contemporary art that we do every other month. It takes a lot of people to make a screening like this happen, so I have a list of thanks here. First and foremost always is Alex Harrington, our Education Department Assistant, who really did a lot of the work that makes the show like this possible. I'd also like to thank Kate Brown, our projectionist, who equally is some of the heavy lifting for an evening like this. And Anna Katz, who isn't here this evening, but for the past 2 years, she's our Wendy Stark Curatorial Fellow and actually oversees all public programs at MoCA, and you just couldn't ask for a better collaborative partner than Anna. But of course, last but not least, I'd like to thank Barbara for coming back and allowing us to screen this wonderful film. Her new movie, Horace Tapscott musical Griot, that we're here to see tonight, actually just won the Feature Documentary Audience Award at the Pan-African Film Festival. I hope you'll come back and join us on May 11th in conjunction with the Arthur Jaffa exhibition that we'll be having at the Geffen Contemporary at MoCA. We're going to screen Dreams Are Colder Than Death, and Sadia Hartman of Columbia will actually be there. She's one of the featured intellectuals in the film. That screening, uncharacteristically, will actually take place at the Geffen Contemporary at MoCA in Little Tokyo, and that's May 11th, and I hope you'll come back and join us then. Let's see. Writing in the LA Weekly about Barbara's new movie, Matthew Durston describes not only her films, but the films of some of her colleagues in what came to be known as the Los Angeles School or the Los Angeles Rebellion, which by my thinking is one of the most important American film movements and really came out of UCLA in the mid to late 70s, is that fair to say? And he writes, "Their intensely personal films looked like documentaries, but unspooled like dreams." And I thought this film, you might say, is something that tells a story, maybe looks like a narrative, but moves like music. I actually think it's very rare for a film to, in its form, match its subject matter as well as this one does. And talking about Tapscott's music with Barbara prior to the screening, she said to me that that he explores with his music, and his life was an exploration as well. And I think this film has a similar kind of, I don't want to say searching, but exploratory quality. And I find it to be a very loving and caring portrait, not only of him, but of the work that he did. Writing about Tapscott's music in Los Angeles Times in 1990, Bill Kohlhaas described his piano style as involved, sometimes rollicking, sometimes pensive, and very much his own. And I think that might be a nice description of the form of this film as well. Now this screen is taking place, I won't say in conjunction with, because it's not open yet, but adjacent to the Kerry James Marshall exhibition that'll open on Saturday. And in describing the intent of his project, Kerry James Marshall writes, "I'm trying to establish a phenomenal presence that is unequivocally black and beautiful. It is my conviction that the most instrumental, insurgent painting for this moment must be of figures, and those figures must be black, unapologetically so." And while Marshall is speaking of painting, I think that we can say safely that the history of film, while more compressed, is similarly structured by absences and systems of repression and even supremacy. And that therefore, films that celebrate black figures as unapologetically and unequivocally beautiful are equally necessary, and as Bell Hooks might say, necessarily radical. But I don't want to overstate the radicality, because I think that would underplay something else that's incredibly important in this movie, and that's the spirituality. And I think that comes across in the music, but also comes across in just the way that people are photographed and the overall feeling that we get from the film watching it, the affect, if you will. So while the movie, I think, paints a portrait of Tapscott or tells his story or allows him to tell his story, it also becomes an incredibly beautiful picture of Los Angeles itself, and in particular Black Los Angeles. And I think that's because of how it's made. I really think that this is the power of film, is that it can show us how to look at things, right? Films actually show us how to see the world. And if the film is made beautifully, then it can show us some of the beauty that's in the world. So I think it's the way in which McCullough works with her colleagues, how they collaborate, how they're responsive to the contingencies of the given situation that creates such powerful images that really make up this movie. But the beauty is complex. So I've been describing it as a celebration, I've been saying it's beautiful, but this is not a movie that has one note only. If there's joy, it's mixed with sorrow. And maybe like Tapscott's music itself, which he refers to as American classical, if there are moments of grieving, maybe they're mixed with ecstasy as well. Now, I don't know about you, but the last couple months have been pretty rough for me. And it doesn't seem like it's getting better yet, right? So it's becoming increasingly important to me anyway, to pause and celebrate the little victories along the way. And for me, this film is one of those victories and one of those celebrations at the same time. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the maker of the film, Barbara McCullough, whose works have screened in galleries, museums, and film festivals nationally and internationally. Please join me in welcoming back to Los Angeles Filmforum MoCA, Barbara McCullough.
Well, thank you all for coming this evening. It's really an honor to be here again, and particularly an honor to be able to screen my Horace Tapscott musical Griot film. This film, as I kind of say, and I guess it's one of my taglines, children were born, grandchildren were born, before this film was actually, completed. And so, it started, over 30 years ago, when I was actually in film school at UCLA. I only shot, a bit of it, not a lot of it while I was there. But my goal was essentially, I wanted to shoot a project called Who Are the New Jazz People, okay? And who the new jazz people meant, okay? Horace for LA, Black Artist Group, or BAG, for St. Louis, and then AACM, in Chicago, and then culminating, in New York. Well, as with this project, basically, there was a lack of funds, but I did go around to different places to raise money to do that project. And I was told, on one hand, it was too political, and on the other hand, I was told, it was too artsy. Okay, so what did that mean? That meant that I better just stay in this area, okay, to do this film. And of course, Horace was one of those, those folks I really wanted to concentrate on because of his collaboration with his musicians and what the thrust was, for him and to play and what he had in mind in terms of his historical perspective, in terms of who he had learned from, and how he had basically made a promise to get back, but also too. He lived in a very, pivotal time, when Central Avenue was still, I don't want to give too much of the film away, but he basically, he was that person. And when putting the film together, there was all these different segments that I had, and I was trying to figure out what is the thing that's going to bring all of this together. And what brought it all together essentially was Horace telling the story himself. Okay, so, as a filmmaker and dealing with the editorial process, there are things that you're gonna take a look at and see what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. Well, my responsibility really was to let the story emerge from Horace, okay? And so it was really so interesting because the structure really kind of came about after the last two shoots. In 1991. But, and it was really interesting how things emerge because you have an idea when you get ready to do a project, you have an outline of maybe what you want to do, but then maybe you don't stick to that, and that's a good thing because what happens is you're learning something, because of the fact that, things are being revealed to you and through the revelation process, this is where the authenticity of the person comes out. Well, just to go back a little bit further, okay, I came to UCLA at the time when there was a large contingent of African American students there. One of the things that was so interesting is there were all these black guys, and they were leaving, and so all of a sudden there was this influx of women. So you had, let's say Charles Burnett was still there, but almost out. Heidi Garima had already gone. Jamal Panaka was already gone. Let's see, Ben Caldwell and I collaborated, so he was still there. He was taking he also took upon himself another major. So there was just a whole interesting group of women that all started at the same time. So it was Julie Dash, and later on it was Zainabu Irene Davis and Lily Sharon Larkin. And it was so interesting because, to name a few, because there are other names. But it was just so interesting, and all of a sudden, we were counting on them to be our mentors. And what happened was we were each other's, mentors and collaborators. And basically we all worked, on each other's project. We never thought of ourselves as belonging to a school or, LA Rebellion. This was done by other people. And that's fine, but the whole idea of doing our work was to, bring forth images of African American community and community life that maybe folks had not seen before. For the most part, no, they hadn't seen, because what they had seen was probably just basically the blaxploitation movies. So that's kind of like how, I was able to do what I was able to do in terms of shooting and getting as much done as I could. And then later on, I had the, because like Charles Burnett shot stuff. Who else? It was Charles, and then Julie worked on a shoot, and James Jeffrey, who's not with us anymore, and Billy Woodbury worked on a shoot, and then I had Johnny Simmons, who's a great cinematographer, helped shoot stuff, and then in New York, Al Santana, who's really, really great. So it was like a plethora of people who were dipping in to help create, the film, and so also that created a problem too. It's like, how are you gonna make this look like like a whole? How are you gonna make this look like something that basically, is consistent? There's a consistency, there. So I think I was able to pull it off. Unfortunately, Horace only got to see it as work in progress, which is something that I really didn't want. I really wanted it to be a document for him. A living document, because unfortunately a lot of times our great artists and musicians, basically people don't get to really experience who they are until they've passed on to another plane. But anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'd like you to see the film, and I can answer some questions afterwards. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming, because this is really, really thrilling experience to see your appreciation. Members of the Tapscott family are here. Could you stand up, please? Come on, come on. Cecilia and the Tapscott family were incredibly patient over the decades. So I really want to express my appreciation for them. And also, too, are there any of the members of either of the orchestras, or I see Roberto Miranda over there. Could you stand up, please? And also, there are other members, let's say, who weren't included in the film who happen to be here. And either more, more recent, or, I see, let's see here. I thought I saw someone else here. I'm sure? Yeah, stand up! Are there any questions?
How long was the process of shooting the film?
Well, 1977-78 till 1991.
Wow.
Okay, and I would pick up, it's one of those situations where, okay, you have the angst of trying to get it done. You also have, certain levels of poverty. And so also certain levels of, well, I do have 3 kids. Do I feed my crew or do I feed my kids? Okay. So, you have that, okay? And also you have, up and on, bits of, mass depression. But the long and short of it was, I'm really glad that this is my son who's my producer. You gotta finish this thing, and I really appreciate his dogged, encouragement to get me to finish it, really, and there's another story too, okay, Larry Clark, how many of you are familiar with Larry Clark, the filmmaker? Okay, Larry Clark did a film called Passing Through, okay, which was loosely on the life of Horace. Okay, and what was so interesting about that is, I realized that there was all these people that knew Horace and had relationships with Horace, but no one had actually done a film on Horace. But he does appear in Passing Through. And I had seen bits and pieces of Passing Through, and I think I finally saw Passing Through about a year and a half ago when I was at a symposium on politics and the jazz ensemble, which was really, kind of an interesting presentation and a panel. And so I saw more of it. I was in a film festival one time in of all places in Italy, and I saw more of it. But the thing about it was, I'm going like, there's Horace, and nobody did him. Nobody did his story, And I was so pleased that he allowed me to impose myself in his life. And also, too, it's kind of interesting. The first time that there was an interview, K. Curtis Lau, who really helped me get my thoughts organized, okay? I think it was Bernard Nicholas, who's back there. We went over to Cecilia and Horace's house, and we, I think I didn't even have a reel to reel. I think I just had like a cassette tape, and I was like gonna, just get to know Horace, so I could like really have a sense of, really who he was. Because I never really had a long conversation with him. I just knew that his life was interesting enough that it was really, really important to document him. And so that was how, that was a really great experience. Except I don't know what happened to the cassette. And it's not the first time something like that has happened where I had this gem of information and the audio only recording, and some kind of way it got messed up or it got lost. Okay, but anyway, it was a learning experience for me in terms of just let it go, let the person be who they are, okay? And no matter what your preconceived notion is, it's never gonna be the same, And I've really been very fortunate enough to explore the art process with different people. I have another project called Shopping Bag Spirits and Free-Rate Fetishes, Reflections on Ritual Space. Okay, big title, doesn't fit the marquee, but the bottom line is it talked to different artists about what their process was, okay? And that included David Hammonds, Betty Starr, Sengen and Goody, Kamal is in it, some other people are in it, Curtis Lyle is in it, Houston and Kinshasa Conwell, and basically the whole idea was to understand what the art process or other people and what their concepts were, because I was really interested in ritual, and for me ritual meant the creation of a sound, an object, an art piece, words that in some way created a cathartic experience. And I think Horace touches on that too. His playing music was cathartic for him. It enabled him to give back by way of this incredible creative release. So so that's kind of it. Any questions, ma'am?
I have a question. You mentioned losing the cassette.
Mm-hmm.
How did you maintain all of that footage that you maintained over the decades?
Well, okay, it's really was handled by the lab as if it's archival footage. Okay, it's shot in 16 millimeter. Okay, and you got the grain, somebody said the authenticity, of the 16 millimeter. And basically, things always started off in my refrigerator. And if I couldn't just take it right to the lab, and then I would get it to the lab, it was like the next day or a couple of days or something like that. And I had to go and search because it was interesting because when I knew I was my editor, Scott Brock, my main editor, and also my, let's see, I don't know if he's here. Oh goodness, is Chris here? Yeah, there's Chris back there, Chris Toussaint. He also helped with the editing of the film. And what happened, I had to go search because I was going to go to New York, which is where Scott was, and I was going to go to New York, but I needed to get everything together, okay? And I was trying to find everything, and Scott pulled something out of a hat because he was working at Cicalia, which is a Scorsese company. And he was able to call in some favors and actually to get the lab, to process stuff and to change it from the 16 millimeter to digital files. So that was really something. And I had almost given up on it. And it was about Oh goodness! Just before the big chunk was going to go to the lab for transfer, I went to this lab and they said, "Oh yeah, we have it." You know, and I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe they still had my footage. Because my footage had been there for like almost 20 years. So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest any of you, if you are filmmakers, to let your stuff go over that long. Okay? Because I was really very lucky to be able to like go and you know, get my footage. So we got digital files and, you know, went to New York and I spent a month. And then, what is it, I had to give up. I mean, I worked at a place that gave you, after 5 years, you could get a sabbatical. And your sabbatical was 8 weeks, okay? And I was like so lucky because I could go to New York and I could work on the film. And then I went another time to New York and worked on the film. And I've had, like I said, a lot of life experiences that sort of interfered with it. Like, unfortunately, the death of my mother, which was very, very difficult. But it had to be done, you know, even though it's late in terms of getting it out there, you know, and, you know, I'll just kind of end by saying, children were born and grandchildren were born, but the film's finally done. But thank you all for coming.